Hum, hum. Claire can visualize. My mom is here. Oh, because I'm talking about senses. My mother is dead, by the way. Can you back off a little bit though? Stinks. I'm really doing this on the internet. Welcome back to this channel. It's your resident internet psychic medium, a spiritual advisor, Mystic Rain, and I got a lot of questions about one thing: intuition, how to develop it, how to develop psychic gifts. So let's talk about it. So I got a few questions about intuition, about developing your intuition, and then also about identifying psychic abilities. And so what I decided to do is put them all in one video because intuition and psychic abilities are actually the same thing. I can see why you guys would be interested in this. And I think it's also important too, because when you have an ability to develop it and you have like a working relationship with it, you have more faith in what you're perceiving, what you're picking up. You have more faith when it comes to what you're telling other people, particularly if you are like a reader or something like that. So I feel like we can discuss this. So listen, intuition and psychic ability is actually the same thing. A psychic is just an active intuitive. A psychic is someone who has recognized they have intuition, has made a decision to actively hone their intuition, consciously works with their intuition, and also potentially has an ability to pull on their intuition at will. Now, if you go on dictionary.com, dictionary.com will have you all twisted up because dictionary.com said something about somebody that like claims to be something. And then they have synonyms for psychic in dictionary.com and Webster Merriam. That's like medium. And I was like, that's wrong because a psychic and a medium are not the same thing. So there's that. But yeah, a psychic and an intuitive are the same thing. And working on developing your intuition is actually really working on developing your psychic abilities. So in order to give you the practical steps, in order to help you develop your intuition, I need to first explain to you specifically what different psychic abilities actually exist. Because how you focus on developing your intuition becomes more efficient if you focus on honing the area of your psychic ability that is the strongest. It makes no sense, in my opinion, to try to work on like the weakest part of the psychic ability when you may be naturally stronger in one particular area. Everyone is different, right? And people have some senses that are stronger than the other, right? So you have your physical senses, I guess, which is like your sense of touch and your sense of smell. And then you got like the clairs, right? The psychic sense, right? Some people have a stronger sense of smell than other people. Some people can walk into a boys' locker room at a high school and it does not faze them. And then there are some people that walk in there and they want to throw up. When women get pregnant, their sense of smell is sharper than like that of a man, right? Some people have 20/20 eyesight. Some people don't, right? So people in general have senses that may be stronger than other people. I don't wear glasses. I'm one of the ones with 20/20 eyesight. Some of you may be wearing glasses. In this case, my sense of sight is stronger than your sense, right? However, you may be a brilliant cook because maybe you have a really awesome sense of taste. So it's the same thing when you're dealing with like psychic senses or you're dealing with the clairs. There will be one that is probably naturally stronger for you than it is for others. And so the trick is figuring out what that one is and then work on honing your intuition through that path because it's just more efficient, right? Like, why would someone that doesn't have 20/20 vision start driving in a car at night with no glasses on? Just because I can do that doesn't mean you should. You know what I mean? So let's start with the dominant four psychic senses. There's a lot of them. There are more than four. There's actually about 8 or so, but let's start with the dominant 4, because the dominant 4 are going to be the ones that you've already heard of, because most likely your dominant sense sits in one of these 4, right? And so that is clairvoyance, that is clairaudience, that is clairsentience, and also claircognizance. So for clairvoyance means clear seeing. Typically, when people are clairvoyant, the majority of what they see is happening right here in the mind's eye. Some people may see an apparition, but you don't have to see an apparitions in order to be considered clairvoyant. A lot of the activity happens in the mind's eye. You may be someone that gets visions. You may be someone that has really vivid dreams. Maybe you have premonitions, or maybe you can just see a scene play out in your mind's eye and the scene is really, really clear, right? That's a clairvoyant. And when we think about psychic senses and someone thinks about a psychic, people automatically assume that that person is clairvoyant. That is what they're thinking that being a psychic means. Part of that may be pop culture too, and movies and social media and how people are actually depicted. But there's like this sort of public consensus that for whatever reason that like that's the main one. I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if I agree that clairvoyance is the main one. But what I do agree with is the fact that it's a very common one. And you see it all the time. Like a lot of you probably watch tarot readers here on YouTube. And they're clairvoyant when maybe they're shuffling the cards and then they'll say, "Oh, I can see blah, 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 blah." Or they're showing me blah, 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 blah. It's all happening in the mind's eye. They're clairvoyant. That's how they're seeing. People that are clairvoyant too are also really good at visualization. So if you are someone that does like manifestation practices or guided like meditations that require you to visualize, visualizing will come easy to a clairvoyant, someone that's naturally clairvoyant. Even though people can visualize, my mom is here. Oh, because I'm talking about senses. My mother is dead, by the way. For those of you that don't know, I know it's morbid. I can laugh because I've come to terms. But she has a way of appearing and letting me know that she's around. Can you back off a little bit though? Stinks. A little bit though. She's saying no. She's teasing me now. I'm really doing this on the internet. Visualization. Not everyone has an ability to visualize easily. Some people can do it in a blink of an eye, and it does take other people like really conscious, deliberate effort to visualize a person, a place, a thing. But people that are clairvoyant, when they're seeing in their mind's eye, they can see a scene. And people that are naturally clairvoyant, it's almost like maybe watching a movie or watching a clip of a movie or a TV show. By the way, my mom said that she wanted to make a debut in the video. I don't know what that means. I guess that means she wants to be seen. I don't really know. I don't really know if people can see her. I don't see her as an apparition because again, I don't like ghosts, but I do see in my mind's eye. That's how my clairvoyant works. And for those of you that's like, where is she? She's standing over here. Clairvoyants get scenes in their head. So if you're trying to figure out whether or not this is something that you can do, this would work for you if you were someone that gets like pictures that pop up, but something that you can see in your mind's eye. A picture, maybe you have an ability to see it in color, a scene. Some people get it like Polaroids. Some people get it like clips. And so it depends on how you receive the information, but you will be able to see things in your mind's eye and it'll happen a lot. It'll just be like pictures popping up. When I first started, the way my clairvoyance worked in the beginning is not how it worked now. The way it worked in the beginning, it was very simple. It worked kind of like a Polaroid, kind of like an Instagram feed. They were just pictures, nothing was moving. The way I see it now, it's like a movie playing. And so it can also like develop in terms of like how you see it. But I would say if you could see one or the other, particularly if images pop up for you out of the blue. So you weren't necessarily thinking about something, or maybe even if you were doing a reading, maybe your mind was on that track, and then you'll get a picture that's something that wasn't initially what you were seeing previously. Anything that pops up, anything that you didn't draw on, anything that was not inspired from you, anything that's not your picture, right? If it just pops in your mind, then it's a pretty good indicator that you're probably clairvoyant. So the next of the big four is clear audience or clear hearing. And this happens in the mind's ear. So you have a mind's eye that kind of happens here, that you can see pictures and things in your mind. But then there's also like hearing in your mind as well. It's also like an inner ear. So there is a voice that you have of like your voice talking to yourself, like when you're talking to yourself in your mind. And then, but someone that's clear audience, there's a separate voice. So it's not you talking to yourself, it's a separate voice talking to you in your mind. Now, here is the big distinction between being like clear audience and then maybe having like some symptoms of like schizophrenia. And before I continue, remember, I'm just a resident internet psychic medium and spiritual advisor. I'm not a doctor, so don't hold me to doctor standards. But the difference is that it's a calm voice. If you're a clear audience, it's not a threatening voice. It's not a dominating voice. It's not a scary voice. It's not demeaning. It's a very calm voice, very flowing, very loving, very neutral. And for some people, kind of soft. It doesn't feel threatening, it doesn't feel intimidating, but you have your own voice inside your head, the one that you use to talk to yourself, and then there's a separate voice inside your head that is very nice, and it only talks to you when you're picking up information. So it's not something that's like constantly running. Some of us that have minds that don't ever shut off have voices that are like our own voice, really, that's constantly running in our head because we're constantly talking to ourselves about something. That's not this voice. This voice says what it has to say when it has something to share, and then it kind of like shuts up. But it's very calm. It's not scary and it's not intimidating. You should never feel intimidated, scared, or worried by this voice. So if you're trying to figure out the difference, that is the difference. Now, the interesting thing about clear audience is that I have noticed over the last couple of years or so, like 2-3 years, it has actually increased in the amount of people that I've seen who are actually clairaudient. And you can tell who's clairaudient when people do this. Again, for those of you that watch the tarot channels on YouTube, and before when I was saying, sometimes they'll say, oh, I'm seeing this or I'm seeing that. You know someone's clairaudient when they said, I just heard. So, oh, I'm hearing this, or I'm hearing that, or I just heard. That's when they're clairaudient. So if you've had a moment with yourself where you're like, oh, I think I just heard, that's an example of clairaudience. Clairaudience, I would say that clairaudience has a tendency to be more so of a natural thing. However, I've noticed that it's not necessarily always the strongest for people who are just starting. It doesn't mean that it won't grow to be their strongest clair, but I've noticed it's not necessarily strongest when you're just starting. And the reason for that is because, one, when you're just starting, you're still in the process of learning to trust your intuition, so you may not trust what you're hearing, right? Sometimes it's easier to trust something you can see versus something that you're hearing. You think that you're like making it up. And then also, when you're first starting, there's a level of being like closed off. And so, due to maybe fear or just not knowing or anxieties about it, and maybe, not wanting to hear. And so for a lot of people, they may have this, but if you're newer, you may not be all the way tapped in. It may not be initially your strongest sense if you're just starting, but something to look out for. The next one is clairsentience. This is actually probably the most common. And particularly when people are just starting off, I would actually wager and say that this is probably the most common one. Clairsentience says clear feeling. Some people would call that empathy, empaths. Just being able to feel, being able to walk in a room and feel it, right? Feel that it's a good room or a bad room. Feel that tensions are high or tensions are low. Feel that people are happy or feeling that people are sad. It is the sense of feeling, being able to perceive energetic frequencies by simply feeling it. It's highly likely that the majority of you all are sentient. I actually kind of would put money on it, if I'm going to be quite honest, and a lot of you probably are, because a lot of people start that way. You start by going, I just had a feeling. I just had a feeling I shouldn't have done that. Or I just had a feeling I should have done that. Or I just have a feeling you probably shouldn't do that. I just have a gut feeling. That's all clairsentience. And that's how it starts for a lot of people. It starts that way. And so I would suspect that for a lot of you, this is probably your most dominant one. If you feel like it is, just hold on to it, and we'll get to some practices that you can do later. The last of the big four is clear cognizance. So clear knowing, to just know something. And particularly when you just know something that you shouldn't know, or you know something that you have no evidence for, you have had um, no tangible evidence has been received by you that would warrant you knowing this information. You don't have anything logical to stipulate or confirm that you know this thing or why you know this thing. You just know this thing. You don't have any background information on it, no previous knowledge of it, no previous experience of it, but for somehow you just know. That is clear cognizance, and that is the big four. A lot of people think that when they think psychics, they think the majority of them are clairvoyant, and that also that they're clear cognizant, that they just know things. A lot of people don't realize that it's a lot of times it doesn't come in to that for people, that the reason why psychics have the ability to perceive is because they're picking up on different things. They're hearing things, they are feeling things, they're empaths, and so they're receiving the information in a lot of other ways. They may not just know, right? Or they may not just see. Not every psychic wants to see. Not every psychic wants the responsibility of knowing the information, and so they may not prefer to receive their information that way. An example of just knowing is downloads. When people say, oh, I'm getting a download, or I downloaded this information, that is someone that is clear cognizant, someone that just knows. They don't have a reason for understanding why they know what they know. They don't have evidence. They don't have experience with it. They just downloaded the information. It just popped in their mind, and now they have the outcome of something. They just know it. Those come in the form of downloads. So if you feel like you're someone that gets downloads, then you are someone that is clear cognizant. And so when figuring out what your dominant sense is when it comes to all of those, it's so simple. Don't make this more difficult than what it needs to be. Think about how you receive your messages the majority of the time. That's it. So if you feel like, hey, Mr. Crane, I'm all for, cool. A lot of psychics are all for. How does the information hit you the majority of the times? Right? For example, for me, the information hits me through hearing the majority of the times first. I'm the majority of the time clairaudient first. And then I may hear something and I may go, what does that mean? And then from that, it could kick in everything else. Then I may see something because I ask, well, what is that? Right? Then I can see something. And so, or then I'll get the download. And then it all kind of comes in. But for me, I get it first by hearing. So with you, how does the information hit you first? Right? What is step one? Usually that step one is your most dominant one. Now there's a lesser four, and it's lesser for a reason. These are not as common. Not everyone actually has these things or use these things or wants these things. And, I'm not saying that none of you have this as your dominant one, but I would say if you're looking for your dominant one, start with the first four I just mentioned. However, I'm going to share these other four ones with you because you just may be curious. So another one is clairgustance. Am I saying that right? Clairgustance, Gustance, which means taste, clear tasting. Because remember, taste is still a sense. And it's someone that has the ability to pick up on flavors, right? And so I'm going to give you an example of how this would work. I one time was doing a medium reading for someone, and this person had a grandmother figure come through, and she was showing me what she like likes to do. And she told me that she used to cook a lot for this person when this person was a child. And she showed me like her being in the kitchen, and she had this big pot and she's staring at this pot. And I remember just having like a question of, oh, that's a really big pot. What's in the pot? And then immediately I could taste there was chicken broth, and there was celery, and there were carrots, and there were potatoes. And I was able to taste what was in the pot. And so I was able to say to this person, hey, like, did your grandmother make this dish for you a lot? It has celery, carrots, potatoes in it. People can taste. This is not something that's like super like one of the most common ones, but I have seen some people actually have this. And the way you would know you would have it is literally if you can taste things. If you can taste things that you did not eat. Like, and it's also not in your stomach. So I don't mean that you burp and then like you taste something. I mean like you're like tasting something with like your mind's tongue almost. Which is really weird to say, but that's kind of how it works. There's another one called like clear aliens. I've also seen it worded like clear olfaction, the nose, so smell. Having the ability to smell, clear smelling. I can smell, right? Like I said, I can smell my mother. She's still here. She's standing right over there. And every once in a while she's poking me on the shoulder, but she's here for her debut. But she lets me know that she's there first through smell. That's how she kind of pops up. That's how I know that she's like showing up, right? Smell a lot of times is associated with people that have passed over. Typically ancestors and loved ones is typically who I see use smell the most. They are people who, after they pass, they want to let you know that they're here for you. Maybe they want to give you some sort of encouragement or let you know that they're still watching over you. And so to let you know that they're with you or sometimes standing right next to you, they will give you the smell of how you remember them. And so, for example, if they had a certain kind of perfume that they used to wear, they may fill the room up with that kind of smell. And the smell a lot of times is so potent that it's like sitting right in your nose hairs. And you're like, I don't understand, because you know that that smell isn't manifesting where you are, but it's so strong that it can sometimes be pungent. This is something too that it also depends on what the smell is. So for example, when it comes to my mother, because of cigarette smoke, for me it's really easy to identify. I find it really, really pungent, right? My sister, however, she used to have this certain perfume that she used to wear all the time. And when she passed, the family remembered her by this perfume. And I remember when she passed, people would say, what's the name of that perfume she used to wear? What's the name of that perfume she used to wear? So whenever she pops up, I get a waft of that perfume that she used to wear. Some people, it could be the smell of food, like how we were talking. If it's like a grandparent that used to cook for you a lot and that was their love language, you may get a smell of like a roast dinner or something like that. For some people, they do flowers. Flowers is a common scent that loved ones have, like roses and stuff, to let you know that they're near to you. So smell is a big one too. Well, not really a big one, but you know what I'm saying. There's also one called like clear tangency, which is touch. This is what people could think of with like psychometry. So there are people who can touch your things that you own, like this remote. They can hold it and they can read you based off of touching something that you own or touching something that you used to hold, because again, it's just energy, right? It's energy transfer. If it's your possession, your energy probably been transferred into it a long time ago, and they can pick it up and they can perceive this. For me, I would say this is actually like my weakest by far. I actually did a class once on that, and like it was a terrible failure. And it was one of those things I realized I'm like, I'm good at a lot of things, but that's not one of them. There's also one more called like clear kinesthesia, which is like the ability to like perceive like movements or like a shift in frequency or like vibration, particularly in the body. So a lot of medical intuitives, they use this one. So if you can like sense like the vibration shift, is my understanding of how it works. And I'm saying it that way because it is different than clairsentience, which is like the empathy. So for example, sometimes people that are clairsentient, people have clear feeling or the empathy, you may be able to pick up on like knee pain. Someone may have knee pain. You may be temporarily be able to sense that, right? Because you can feel it because you got clear feeling. Whereas I believe with clear kinesthesia, I believe is how you say it, it is like more so of like a vibration. So you can perceive like maybe potentially abnormal vibrations in the body. And a lot of medical intuitives do this. I think I'm right on that one. It's not a common one. If I'm mistaken, yeah, someone feel free to clear that up in the comments for everybody else so they don't take that information and run with it. So that's all the clears I got for you. So again, which one is your most dominant one? Your most dominant one is the one where the message arrives first. You can have 2, 3, 4 of them, but how does the message primarily get to you first? Do you have a gut feeling first? And then you're like, I wonder what that's about. Do you see a picture pop in your head first? And then you're like, I wonder what's that about. It's okay if the other ones kick in, because typically what happens, they trigger each other. And the reason why they trigger each other is just because you naturally ask questions. So for example, like how I said, how for me, I hear things first, right? And so I may go, well, what's that about? And then everything will start to kick in. Well, it's about this, and then I'll see a picture, right? Or it's about this, and then I'll get a feeling. Or I'll get a download. But it starts with hearing it first. So where does yours start? And that, I would say, is your dominant one. Now, practical advice on how to develop these things. The first thing I would say is record keeping. In order to not only develop these abilities, but learn to trust them, what you really need is evidence that you're right, because we have a human brain, right? And we need to see it. If we don't see it, it doesn't exist. And so I would highly recommend that you get yourself a journal, right? If you want to use your notes app, fine, but like get yourself a journal, and every time you feel like you're feeling something, you saw something, you heard something, whatever, you need to write it down. Write it down and then just keep a running go of it all the time. If you feel like it's happening often and it's not reasonable for you to have a journal, again, use a notes app and then jot it down later in a journal, right? And you just want to keep a record. You're not trying to prove any of it. You're just writing down what you picked up on. And then what you'll notice as you continue this practice is that eventually things will start to come to pass. And you'll be able to check things off like, yes, that's right, no, that's wrong. And then when you start to see the checks start to come in that, yes, this is right because it's come to pass, you can reflect. What was that situation like when I picked up on that? What was the feeling like when I felt that? If it was a gut feeling, do you know how to tell the difference between a gut feeling or like you're hungry, right? So you want to be able to reflect on, what did that experience for me feel like? If you heard something, jot it down. And then if it comes to pass, remind yourself what that experience was when you picked up on it. As you're jotting these things down, also make a notation of how it got there. Do you feel like it got there through clairvoyance? Do you feel like it got there through hearing it, through knowing it? Was it a download? Well, notate how you actually received it. And then just through time, you'll see that things start to be right. The more you can see evidence that you're right, the easier it is to believe whatever it is that you're saying, right? On the flip side, all the things that are no's, you'll be able to understand the feelings you get when it's a no. You'll be able to tell the difference. So if you start to notice a pattern that every time it's right, such and such happened. Every time it was no, such and such is what happens. You can identify the pattern. So when it happens again in the future, if you get that feeling, then you're like, no, that's actually a no, I know that pattern. Or, oh, no, that's actually a yes, because I know that pattern. So keep a record, get a journal. I will also say that when you're doing this, you are working with energy. You are now an energy worker, right? Naturally, as an energy worker, you manifest things because you're now learning how to manipulate energy and you're now learning how to control energy. And by default, you are now manifesting things. Because of this, I would highly suggest that any journal you get for this exercise, that you make sure that that journal is like a stars kind of journal. So if you could find a journal that's like celestial theme, zodiac theme, I don't really care. As long as the journal itself has stars on it. If for whatever reason you can't find this journal, or to be quite frank, you just feel like you can't really afford it right now, and maybe you're keeping your notes on like loose leaf paper or a extra journal you had lying around, I would highly recommend that you draw stars all through that thing. Draw stars on the front cover, draw stars on the back cover. Because trust me when I tell you, it's a lot easier to manifest when it's already written in the stars. The next thing is to develop a symbol language, right? You want to develop a language that one makes sense to you when you're picking up messages, because the language that makes sense to you when you're picking up languages or messages will be the way messages are then relayed to you. And if you are working with spirit, if you have a symbol language, then spirit will also communicate with you in symbols that make sense to you. So what do I mean by that? A lot of people will look at an angel number, they'll see the number 555, and to them that means that there's change on the horizon. Some people can see a butterfly, and for that, that means that there's going to be some kind of transformation, some kind of growth, right? We already have symbols that kind of like live in the subconscious, but for you, develop a symbol language. How you feel about certain symbols may not be how everyone feels about certain symbols, and that's okay. Some people see the sun, and for them, that is a symbol of success. So you want to develop a symbol language and figure out what different symbols mean to you, so that when you see them, or it's communicated to you by knowing or feeling or even hearing, that you know what that actually means. And so I have something to recommend. So one, I have this book, The Element Encyclopedia of Secret Signs and Symbols. I will leave this an Amazon link to this book down below. This is literally a reference guide. You're not going to get this book and make a cup of tea and read through it. That's not what's going to happen here, okay? But this is a really good reference book. If you see a symbol and you're like, I don't know what that means, what does that mean? A lot of symbols actually live in this book, and I like it. I've had it for years, right? Like, for example, a dragon. This is this page. Oh, you can't see. A dragon is a whole thing about what that means. There's one here, fairy. For a fairy, a whole thing about what a fairy is, or what the symbol of a fairy is. And so I would actually recommend this book. In addition to that, I would also recommend that you create a symbol language yourself. You can create a symbol divinatory system. So this is my charm bag. I'm very proud of this. And in this charm bag is my bag of charms. And I'm going to pull some out so you can see. Oh, there we go. Oh, I don't even know. Oh. You guys got it, right? Okay. So, let me pull out a symbol. These are literal charms. These are jewelry charms, right? This one is of a bee. And I have one of a sheep. And I have one of a crown. I like these. These are so cute. There's a crown here. And I have a bag of them. And what I did is I ordered them. You can get them. You can make your own charm bag. Okay, I'm going to give you the tea, right? So go take yourself to Temu. I know they're not sustainable, but we are psychics over here. It's not my business. And you're going to like literally Google, or not Google, Temu, charm, or like jewelry charm. And you can find bags of them for like $2-3. And there's like 100 to 150 different little charms in there. You can get yourself a cute little pouch, right? For like $1 or $2. And then you can put that bag of charms in your little pouch, and boom, you just created your own divinatory system and your own symbol language and your own charm bag, right? And what you're going to do is take all of those symbols, and you are going to sit with one by one, and you're going to ask yourself, what does it mean to you? And that's it. You're not going to pass any judgment on it, and you're going to make a notation of what that means to you. Some people will just remember it. Some of you may need to write it down, but what does it mean to you? That definition that you assign the charm will now be its meaning. So when spirit communicates with you, it will communicate with those particular symbols to you, and you know that if you see it, it means a certain thing. So for example, when it comes to this bee, my charm pouch has about 7 bees in it. I've got 2 bees of this size, and then the rest of the 5 are really tiny, itty bitty, right? For me, When I see a bee, that is a worker, right? Hard work. It's a worker bee, right? If I see the little tiny itty bitty one, then that means it's a drone bee, right? Potentially a soldier bee, depending on what's sort of going on in the reading. But when I see this one, because this one is a bigger one, I know this is the queen bee. What's the queen bee's job? The queen bee's job is to make more bees, right? And so that's the meaning I have set for this. And so if I'm doing a reading and then I pull some charms and this comes out, I know what that may mean in the context of what the reading actually is. For this one, for this little tiny sheep here, when I see a sheep, for me, that means like, what's the saying about like the sheep leading the blind or the blind leading the sheep or being corralled like sheep? What I see when I see a sheep is weakness. I see weak-mindedness, right? Now, this may not feel the same for you. You may see a sheep and think something completely different. It doesn't matter what you think it is, as long as you have a meaning for you. So you can create your own symbol language. And I would recommend that you do that as a way of helping to develop your intuitive gifts. It's something that's tangible, right? And some people are like tactile learners. It's active. And because the bag can be so small, because charms are so small, for those of you that are still in the broom closet, you can have your own divinatory system, and it's small enough where people won't actually see it, right? Also, if you're someone that is not there yet when it comes to like tarot cards, or maybe you just have no interest, but you wish that you had something physical that you can use for a divinatory practice, you can make your own charm system, your own charm bag, and use it as a way of creating your own symbol language. That way, messages will arrive to you in the symbols that you recognize, so you can easily decode it. The next thing is meditation. And I know some of you are going to hear that and you're going to be like, oh, so many people, when I'm trying to figure out how to develop my intuitive abilities, tell me to meditate. And I get it. It's super tedious. And, the ADD kicks in. I understand. However, the common misconception is that meditation is a way to like empty your mind of thoughts, right? People think that meditation is the absence of thought. What they don't realize is that meditation is actually the discipline of thought. You can't stop thinking. If you stop thinking, you'd be dead, right? But what you can do is control what you think about. You can control what thought forms you allow to run in your mental space. It's a form of discipline, meditation. And if you can learn how to discipline a thought form, which is just a form of energy, it's just one of the forms of your energy, then you can also learn how to discipline the rest of your energy. When you can learn how to discipline it, you then know how to replicate it. If you know how to replicate the energy, then you know how to control the energy. So what I would recommend, particularly if you're starting out, is that you try to do 30 minutes to 60 minutes of meditation each time you do a meditative session. And I get it. Some of you are like, whoa, that's a really long time. I understand. I get it. Some of you are like, but I get real itchy. I understand. I get it. But it's not about the meditation. Now, meditation itself has a lot of benefits, but in this particular circumstances, what you're really learning how to do is control it. You want to figure out how to get into a meditative state quickly. You're learning how to raise your vibration quickly. You're learning what energy forms to entertain, what energy forms to dismiss. It is a form of discipline. And the more disciplined you are at meditating, then that means the more disciplined you are at controlling your own energy itself. If you can control your energy, then you can use your intuition and tap into it rather than waiting for it to hit you spontaneously. A lot of people, when they're starting out, they have these intuitive hits, but it's spontaneous. You don't necessarily know when you're going to get it. And when you do, you don't know what to do with it because you didn't know that you were going to get it that day anyway, right? Whereas if once you are disciplined and you have an ability to control your energy, you can pull on it whenever it is that you actually want to. So instead of waiting for your clairvoyance to kick in, it's almost like turning on a TV. You can turn the screen on and see it yourself. You don't have to wait to get hit with the message, right? For me, again, because I don't have to wait to be told something. I can ask and then get the response in my ear. And so it's just about learning how to control. And the last thing for this particular subject, what I would say, at least for right now, I may come up with more things later, is be a spirit detective. Ask. Ask. If you're working with spirit, just ask them. You'd be amazed at how much time you would save if you just ask the damn question. So many waiting to be hit with information when you can just be like, oi, hey, what you got for me today? And then they'll just tell you, right? So you can also just ask the question and follow where you feel like you're being led. And in the beginning, you're not going to know what's going on. You may ask, what's the reason for so and so? And you may get a gut feeling, and you may not have no way of figuring out what that means, right? But remember, you're just the messenger. It's not your job to know. And so if you can accept that the majority of what you receive will be out of context. The majority of what you will receive will make you feel nuts. It'll make you feel crazy. You're going to have to accept that. You're also going to have to accept that because you are perceiving energy, this is energy that other people that do not have intuitive abilities do not have an ability to see, because you're tapping into an energetic field that a lot of people don't even know exists. And so you actually may pick up on something, say it to that person, and they may go, what? Huh? No, that's not true. And then you're shook because you're like, holy shit, I fucked up. Not necessarily. A lot of the times, whatever you picked up on is not in their consciousness yet, because you are reading the energetic field. You may have an ability to pick up on something that's going to happen in 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months. They're going to say to you, no, that's not true, because it hasn't caught up to them yet. They don't have an ability to perceive. And so another thing that you're going to have to do is also accept that you may relay that information, and people may make you feel like you're wrong, right? And that's okay, because they're just not caught up yet. And the last piece of advice I would say is also accept that there actually may be times when you're wrong, right? And like be okay with that too. And the reason for that is it's human nature. It just is how the brain works. That when you're picking up on information that you have no context for, you have no background for, the brain will start to do this thing where it starts to fill in the blanks, right? And so as you're learning to discipline your energy, eventually you'll get better at being able to see what your brain filled in and what it didn't. But that's not foolproof, and nobody is 100% on that. Doesn't matter how well practiced they are, people still get it wrong, right? And just know that, yeah, it's also possible that you may get it wrong because it's possible that your brain plugged in information because you were trying to make sense of the information you received, because when you received it, there's no context, there's no background, there is no sense. So I'm going to leave you guys with those things. And I hope that information was helpful, and it gives you like a tangible way to start trying to actually develop it. You develop your ability by working with it. There is no other way. And also know that the ability doesn't stop developing. There's not a point in time where someone reaches level 10 and then it's done. It always develops. And because you're just in practice, the more you do something, the more times you practice it, the more you practice it, the better you get at it, right? It's really that simple. So don't have so much pressure on yourself to get to one thing quickly. Also know that let's say you realize through this video that your dominant clair is really clairvoyance and you really want it to be clairaudient, right? Still work with your clairvoyance, because your audience will just develop. As you develop one clair, the other ones will develop naturally over time as well. And the reason for that is because, like I said earlier, they're all linked. Again, when I hear something, I may go, well, what is that? And then I'll be able to see it. They're all linked to each other. And so as you work on developing one clair, your other clairs will get stronger. Clairaudience has always been my dominant clair. But when I started with clairvoyance, I saw still photos. Only photos, whereas now I can see movie scenes, right? And so they all sort of develop over time as you are developing one. So don't feel like you have to develop one and then the other and then the other and then the other, right? Just work on the one that's your dominant one. And then as that develops, the other ones will too. Because once you develop the dominant one, you start to become more open and more receptive to receiving messages. You become more trusting. And the more trusting you become, the more it just starts to fly at you from different ways. But I would actually argue that you don't necessarily have to make a deliberate attempt to work on each clair separately. Go with the one that's your dominant one, and as that grows, the rest of them kind of grow naturally by default. And remember that you will grow naturally by default at the more and more you're in your craft and in your practice. The older you get, the more you start to trust yourself. And intuition too also grows with like major milestones in life as well. So for example, like when people get older, they naturally are more confident in themselves. They feel better about themselves. They're more sure of themselves, and those things as well will also develop the intuition as well, because it's self-assuredness. It's having a greater ability to trust self. And as your trust for self grows, which a lot of time comes with age, then your trust in your own guidance grows too. So it's also just sort of part of like the life journey. So don't feel like there needs to be a level that you're supposed to hit. There is no like cap out level. It all just kind of evolves with time, right? For those of you too, I'm going to leave you with one last thing, that work with spirit, because again, not everyone does. But let's say you have a spirit guide and you figure out your symbol language and you figure out your dominant clair, you can ask them to talk to you that way as well. So if you figure out your dominant clair's clairvoyance, you can ask them to send you photos. Hey, hello, when you're trying to talk to me, can you send me a Polaroid? You know? And then they'll start to communicate with you more so that way as well. So anyway, guys, I'm going to leave this video here. I really hope that was helpful. And as always, if you like what you see, subscribe to this channel. And I'll see you all soon.